Hello everybody, my name is Stevie Marchant and this is my wood shop. Today I'm going to show you how to make a wooden cutting board or a tea tray, something like that. Mine's intended as a tea tray, but if you use the right finish you can use it as a cutting board as well. For this project I'm using this old waste piece of rubbish. It used to be a pool table, and you can see it's still got a finish on one side of it, so we're going to sand that off. I'm going to cut it down the middle and hopefully be able to make two tea trays, coffee trays. I've got to chop this bit off here because it's got these horrible bolt holes, nut holes, where the pieces of table join together. And then, as a little pattern, I'm going to put these two pieces of pine in the middle. So we're going to cut some sections across here like this, and then glue these in to give it a little striped pattern as well. Right, let's get started then. Okay, so first of all I'm going to use the miter saw to chop off the crappy bits with the holes in. By all means you can do this with a hand saw, it's just a lot quicker for me to do it with a miter saw. Mine's a sliding miter saw as well, so it can reach a bit further. It won't reach all the way to the end, but what we can do is just cut it as far as it can go, flip it over and cut the rest of it. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be shaping it afterwards anyway. You can do this many different ways. You can use a band saw, you can use a hand saw like I said, you can use a table saw. Just like I said, miter saw is the easiest way for me because it's already set up, it's right where I want it to be. And this type of miter saw can cut through metal as well, so if I do snag a bit of bolt or a bit of nut that's in there, then it's not going to be the end of the world. Right, let's get started. So flip it over, line up the blade with the hole that's already been cut, and then here we go again. Yeah. Well, as you can see, the holes run a lot deeper than I thought they did, so chances of me being able to reuse the other side of the wood is quite slim. And it's going to be a finished side as well that I need to prepare. Typical. Right, so as you can see, because this board is really crappy looking basically, and this is the side that I'm going to be using, we've got this big old chip out here. Like I said, I want to get rid of these holes. I need to straighten up one of the edges so that I can cut it width ways, thickness ways like this. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that right here. Okay, so before we start, I'm going to put my dust mask on. I'll just put it around my neck for now so I can still talk. And my ear defenders on as well. As you can see, I'm going to be using the rip fence here and just taking enough off of this edge to get rid of that nasty blowout piece. I want to save as much thickness as I can. So cut it about there, clamp this down so it doesn't move. There we go. Right, so first I'm going to clean up one edge, flip it over and clean the other edge, and then that will mean that we've got at least an edge that's perpendicular to the face of the wood, so then we can cut it in half when it's up on its side. Let's get to it. Okay, so now we've got a flat edge on the bottom side at least. I don't know what's up with my table saw, but it seems to be a bit wobbly. It's creating a bit of a rubbish cut. But no matter, that's what sanders are for. I'll have to look into that. So now that this side is flat and the piece can sit up perpendicularly like this. We're going to cut it through this way and split it in half, basically. So I'm going to raise the blade up slowly to its highest point until I have cut as high as I can, and then flip it over and do the same the other way. And if there's a gap in the middle, I'll just pull the handsaw out and cut the rest of the way through with the handsaw. Okay, let's get to it. Okay, so as you can see, the table saw didn't quite get all the way through. So like I said, we're going to get a hand saw and just saw down the middle there. Don't have to worry about it being straight because the wood slot will keep the blade straight. It won't allow it to bend at any point anyway. Well, that's always nice when you find a screw that is underneath your table saw. I hope to God that hasn't come off of it anywhere. Okay, and by all means you can do this whole process with a handsaw. If you draw a straight line down the middle, along the top and down the other side, so you know you're keeping your saw straight, as long as your saw follows the lines in all three places, then you're pretty much going to get it straight. I'm too lazy for that, so I use my table saw even though it's falling apart. But now I'm going to clamp this up and use the handsaw to finish the cut all the way through. I've just realised I didn't get this saw from Aldi. So the trick is, when you're cutting pieces like this and you've got it clamped up, when the wood gets thin in the middle, the clamp is likely to squeeze it and then throw it out of shape. So I find it helps if you are cutting that way, slide a piece of wood inside there, and then when you clamp it up it won't squeeze it out of shape. And as you can see, it does take a long time. A lot of patience. It's hard to tell with these thicker pieces where you are in the wood as well. When it gets to a certain point, you can break it off like that. You can see a little notch on there where it pulled apart rather than the saw doing it. So you can either sand that off or try and trim it with a hand saw again. Okie dokie, so this is where we are up to at the moment. We've cut it to the thickness we want, we've cut it to the size roughly that we want. Next step is to chop this rough bit off here. Then I'm going to use the hand plane and get rid of this varnish surface here and this rough surface, flatten it all out. Then we're going to put some sandpaper on it. Literally just put some sandpaper on, I'm gonna go over it with some sandpaper, and then once that is all planed and smooth to how I like it, we're going to chop it across the grain like this, and then put our contrasting wood inside. So we'll have two little stripes along the side of it like this. Right, let's do that now. So, if you're going to plane a piece of wood like this, obviously you don't want it clamped down to your bench anywhere, otherwise you're going to miss that piece of wood planing. So what I like to do is to screw a piece of wood down onto the bench, like so, anywhere. That's what I love about these workbenches. You can screw things down to them. Mine, as you can see, is rough as they come already. So a couple more holes isn't going to hurt it. So then you use that piece of wood to support this piece of wood. As far as I know, I think that's called a shooting board, because it means that you can shoot the plane over the top of it. I think that's what it's called anyway. If you know what it's called or what that technique's called, let me know in the comments, that'd be amazing. So now I've got the hand plane set up again. I've just sharpened the blade as well, so hopefully it'll be in nice and smooth sailing. I'm just going to start by flattening this side. Because the kerf of the hand saw is thinner than the table saw blade, it's left a bit of a ridge on the top. It didn't take away as much material, so we're going to try and get rid of that. Flip it over and get rid of the varnish side. Right, now once I've sanded that should be nice and smooth. Just gotta get rid of this crap now. Okay, so now that that's all nice and planed and sanded down, it's time to add those little inlays in. Actually, I don't know if you can call them inlays, because I'm not going to inset them into the wood. We're going to cut the wood into sections, put the pine boards in the middle, and then squash them, glue them back together again. So I don't know if you call that an inlay or a trim or anything like that, but that's how I do it. I've also got to clean up these edges again, because as you can see, that one is really rough. That's the one I didn't cut initially, and there's a little bit of a chip out here. I don't know what happened with my saw blade the first time around. I think I fixed it, but we'll see. So I'm going to run this edge through again, and then obviously just chop those bits out where I want the pine strips to go. Okay, let's do that now. Okay, so I'm just going to mark two lines on here where I want these little pine strips to go. Actually, There we go, about the thickness of the pine strip itself. One there, and then about another width apart. So there we go. So when we get it on the table saw, we're just going to cut straight down here, and then we'll have two strips separated, and on these lines there'll be a gap where these can go in, and we'll just cut it down to size to fit that. So the first thing I'll do before I do anything else is check that my saw blade is square to the table. So I'll get a nice accurate fit with the pine pieces. So we raise it all the way to the top, put the square on the table, like so, and would you know it? Pretty good. Then, if you remember from the table saw video, if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up in the top bit, the information thing for you. We'll lower the blade so it's just above the piece of wood that we're cutting. There we are. And then we'll use the mitre gauge to cut through the wood there. Set the mitre gauge to 0 on here, which of course will be a 90-degree cut, and obviously we can check that with the square as well. So that's perfect against the blade, nicely up against the gauge, so then we'll set that down. There we are. So now we know that the blade is square to the table this way, and we also know that the blade is square to our mitre gauge this way. So hopefully we'll have a really nice straight cut. Okie dokie, and once you've got your workpiece set up and it's square to the blade, it's pushed up right against your mitre gauge so you know it's not wonky. If your mitre gauge has got one, clamp it down, it does help. Ready, so we get our dust mask on, get the ear defenders on, and let's make the cut. Remember, whenever you're using a table saw to make a cut, take your time with it, make sure everything's lined up, don't rush the cut, you don't want anything to get caught, you don't want any jagged edges. And also remember, don't move any wood out of the way whilst the blade is still spinning. Very dangerous. Okay, so now we've got that sorted, we're going to cut these two pieces roughly down to the same size as these, just so we haven't got a massive piece hanging off the edge when we come to glue it up. So for this I'm just going to get my pencil, make sure it's slightly oversized, got a mark there, and then we can cut it on the mitre saw. So, the next thing we're going to do is cut these across this way so they're not so tall, and that'll just minimise the amount of planing and sanding cutting we've got to do to get rid of this top bit once it's all glued up. And to do that, I'm just going to set it on the table and draw a line to where the wood matches the height of the darker piece of wood. I'll show you. Okay, so we've got the main body of the chopping board here, cutting board, T-board, whatever you want to call it. This is the wood we're going to use for the inlay. And then we're just going to line this up here and draw a line along there like that. So we know that is roughly the thickness of the wood that we need to do. So if we cut that slightly oversized, best to have it oversized and undersized, then we can minimise the amount of sanding and planing and things we've got to do to get rid of this afterwards. And there we are, that's roughly what the finished piece will look like. Very pretty. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is glue and clamp it up. This kind of glue up is much easier if you have some sash clamps or bar clamps. Just move that over there. Okay, all done. Righty, so you may recognise these from another video. These are the aluminium sash clamps, and they're good for this kind of project because their bars are quite flat. And you can set them down so you know that they'll all be lined up and flat and straight on the bottom. So all that you've got to do is apply some pressure on the top to keep it from bowing upwards as it glues, as it dries. There we are. So you want to adjust the clamps so they're just about ready to go to the position you want them. So when you apply the glue, they're pretty much ready to go. Okay, here we are. There we go, so what we want to do is just apply a thin strip of glue. Flatten it out with your thumb, make sure all the surfaces are glued and covered. We don't want too much squeeze out on here because it's a bit of a bubble to clean up. And when that side's done, press it up there. And then this side. So we start clamping them down, nice and slowly. Make sure the wood pieces don't move against each other too much. And a good trick for making sure the boards don't bow up or down is you can put another clamp on top and make sure the bar of the clamp is resting close to the wood, and when you tighten it up, not only will it give an extra bit of support and pressure, it stops the top from being pushed upwards and outwards. Okay, now that's done, drying, we can take the clamps off. These glues don't really take long to dry. Probably about 20-30 minutes as well. If this is on the bottom, this is a fast cure glue and it sets in just 10 minutes. Now setting isn't the same as drying, unfortunately, so once it sets, you still need to be careful with it because the wood can still separate. So you've got to give it an extra few minutes to dry. Like I said, I usually leave it half an hour, 20 minutes for it to dry up. Yeah, it's not turning in too bad. Still going to need a bit of sanding and planing to get it smooth. But it is as we expected. What's this hammer doing here? What's this glue doing here? What's this wood doing here? Okay. Right, let's start planing. Okay, so this is the stage we're at now. We've got the two stripes going down the board. I've got a little bit of a mistake, got some chip out here that I'm not happy with, but I'm planning on routering a nice edge around the outside of it. Hopefully that'll cover that up. I've got a bit of chip there where a bit of pine split whilst I was planing it. But nothing in woodworking is perfect. And we like to work around these problems as woodworkers do. And most of the time we create our own problems and make things a bit more complicated than they should be, but it all works out in the end. So right, the next stage, we've only got about 2 or 3 steps left to go on this. The next stage is to print off some lettering, a message that we want to put on there, and router it out, something like coffee time, or if it's a gift to somebody, write their initials on. My brother and his girlfriend have just announced that they are engaged, so I'm thinking of doing something a bit nicer for that. So something nice and personal could be the date that they got engaged on, maybe their initials on there as well, but yeah, we'll see what we come up with. Okay, so now I've got my template drawn out for what lettering I want put on it. What I've done is I've clamped the tea making board down onto the bench using scrap pieces of wood. So I've pushed some scrap pieces of wood up to the sides and one on the top and the bottom, and I've stopped it from moving around, whilst additionally it doesn't raise above the wood so the router can move freely across the surface without the plate butting up against anything. So I've decided I want the date of the proposal in between these 2 thin strips here, and I'm just going to write the word engaged along the bottom, so then they can keep it as a memento and they can remember what day they got engaged without looking on the phone. So, like with Wayne's nameplate thingy, we're just going to put some masking tape over the wood, protect it from the harsh stickiness of the double-sided tape, and it will be able to more easily come off. So masking up the area, and this will also serve to prevent chip out around the lettering, so it will just mean less sanding and filing between the engraved letters. Okay, so now that's sorted, we're going to put some double-sided tape down. Knock it off, and we can stick this bit down here. There we are. And we can do the same with the numbers. And so there we have it. This is the layout of what I want engraved onto the tea/coffee board, a drinks board. Like I said, in between these two pine strips is going to be the date that my brother proposed to Harriet, and obviously the little word engaged here. Unfortunately, I couldn't find my smaller out of it, so I've had to settle for this one. This is the smallest one I could find, and hopefully it's not going to be too chunky for these letters. Okay, so now I've changed the router bit over to a round over bit, so I can round over the edges basically, and for that I'm going to need a clamp like this. Okay, and here comes my favourite part of any project. Get some spray lacquer on it. If you're going to use it as a chopping board, I recommend using some food-safe oil finishes. This lacquer, it's basically just plastic, spray on plastic. You coat it on, leave it at least a day, and I presume it would be food-safe anyway, but don't quote me on that. But hopefully this is just going to be used for putting cups of tea on and tea bag holders or coffee things. Right, let's get to it then. So when you are finishing, as I've just done here, turn the camera around, make sure you've got an open door or window to let the vapours go through. Still going to stink a bit. So this is with one coat of lacquer on. I'm going to do 2 or 3 more coats and then flip it over and do 2 or 3 coats on the back side as well. And then we'll call it a good one. Okay, so here is the finished piece. Well, almost anyway. As you can see, it's gotten very dark here now. I want to wrap this up before I go to bed, so this is the end of the video for me. It's still a bit tacky, this thing is a bit sticky. When it's finished, I'm going to take note from Steve Ramsey and rub it down with a piece of brown paper. And apparently that makes a really, really good lacquer finish. I don't usually do that, I just spray lacquer it and it turns out okay, so I'll give it a go this time and see how it turns out. A couple of notes on this one. As you can see, the inside of the G's and the A's and the 6, I think, the insides came out because it was such a small fiddly piece of wood, and the router just flicked it off. So yeah, I couldn't find my smallest router bit, so I've gone with the next size up, which made it a bit harder to do. But that's woodworking. No project is ever going to be perfect. As much as I'm disappointed with this, I'm sure the recipient will be happy that something has been made for them by hand. So that's all from me for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you learned something through my mistakes, through my ramblings. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Give it a dislike if you really didn't like it. Leave a comment in there to say what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, what I can do to improve, anything like that. But in the meantime, have a fantastic day, everybody, and I hope this inspires you to make something for somebody for Christmas.